Hey everyone, and welcome to my response video for the tarot challenge called Tarot to the Extreme, where we compare different extremes of decks in our collection based on several categories, and I will list those in the description box below. So for the first category, I had to find my most minimalist and most maximalist or most complex deck. So I would honestly say that the classic Rider-Waite deck to me has always been probably the most minimalist deck, because it is basically all the essential elements that most other tarot decks are based off of. So it's minimalist in that I've learned it already, you know, I'm familiar with a lot of even the smaller details, and I found that as I learned about the symbolism and meaning of the images, they actually became less complex. They appeared less complex to me anyway. And for my most visually complex deck, or most maximalist deck, I would have to say the Next World Tarot. I am always forever impressed with this illustrator's work. And let me see if I can find some of the more detailed, I mean, this isn't even, we'll get into some of the more detailed images, but I mean, you could go on looking at the details in these images forever. I mean, I'm just going to go through and show you a few, because it's, like, look at some of these, all those little, you know, details and drawings that you see in the background. And I mean, look at that. You could go through and look at all these little trinkets and odds and ends that are illustrated in off to the side and in the corners. I mean, it's just stunning. And I mean, wow. And I know a lot of people are very, very fond of this deck. It's one of their favorites, and I'd have to say it ticks every box for me anyway, in terms of being inclusive and representing different people. Just fantastic. So yeah, the next category we were comparing was a daytime to nighttime tarot decks, and so I assumed that that meant, you know, decks that give a feeling of daytime, or that you would use during the day, or maybe the color palette feels more daytime-like. And for me, that deck is the Morgan Greer. And it's partly the bright colors, but it's just, I find staring at those bright colors, it really wakes you up. It's not a deck I've ever really reached for when I'm doing readings at night, and it, yeah, the bright color palette really is very, you know, it perks you up. Let's put it that way. It's very bright, almost neon fluorescent in some cases here. But I love the colors, but definitely it feels very sunny to me. And for a nighttime deck, I chose my Tarot of the Vampires, which is, sorry for the glare. I'm going to go through and show you some of this, but I think you can see why. I mean, this deck just reminds me of my days as, you know, a hardcore Evanescence fan, like goth child, I guess, and all the things I loved about dressing up and, you know, going out of the house to art college with bad makeup and, you know, looking kind of like that chick maybe. But yeah, I love this as a nighttime deck for obvious reasons. It's a very dark theme, and you know, vampires. Yeah, so that was my choice for that one. So So the next category was your best shuffle versus your worst shuffle. So I would have to say, and I know Lee from Thinking Mystic, I think I was thinking of this exact deck when I first heard this challenge, because this linen finish, I don't know if you can see the texture there, it's a linen finish, like card playing poker decks, right? I mean, it doesn't get any easier to shuffle than this one. I'm an overhand shuffler, but this one, I was like, I could shuffle this all day long, you know? Like, it just glides through your hands. It feels really nice. The cards don't stick together. And the Tarot of the Divine is based on, if you don't know, myths and legends from around the world. Gorgeous illustrations. It's just a fantastic deck. And I think this was a really smart choice for a cardstock and finish on the deck. Probably the hardest deck to shuffle for me, the worst shuffle, is probably my Enchanted Tarot deck. Although, just, Lee, I didn't want to copy you on these with the exact same prompts. I think the Visconti deck, I have that exact deck as well that you had in your video, and I would agree that that is probably the worst deck to shuffle. But second to that, and almost as large, is the Enchanted Tarot. It's not as thick of a cardstock, mind you, but some of you may recognize this. This is the absolutely phenomenal tapestry work of Amy Zerner. Absolutely beautiful deck. I mean, it's one of my favorite decks that I own, honestly. But to shuffle it is quite the challenge. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you guys my shuffling method for, and I have fairly large hands. I'm 6 feet tall, and I have the hands to match that. I mean, my fingers are more so long. You know, I have very long, slender hands rather than maybe big, large, broad hands the way a man would. But when I have to shuffle a deck like this, because I can't really, I mean, I don't really like pulling them out and, you know, putting them, I could do that, but that's really uncomfortable. What I do, and I'm hopefully you can follow this, is I will just sift a few on top of the others, like this, under, 3 or 4 on top, over, few under, few over, and just go back and forth. And I can do that pretty quickly. And then I might divide, you know, the decks into piles or whatever, and do that same thing with them, under, over, you know, 2 or 3 cards on the top, 2 or 3 on the bottom. You do that with, you know, your 3 or more piles, and then put them back together. And, you know, if you do that a couple of times, you'll mix the cards up fairly well, I would think, because I've had fairly good results with doing that. So it's something to try, definitely. Hopefully you guys were able to follow what I meant by that method. I don't know what that shuffle method is, or if it has a name, but it works for me. So the next one is your Confronting versus Comforting deck. So this one, my most confronting deck is the Crystal Tarot, and there's a couple of different decks named the Crystal Tarot. So the one I'm referring to is this one by Le Scarabeo. Yeah, these are the backs on them. And this is my most, ever since I first received it, I sort of felt it right away. This is my most confrontational deck. Just, I don't know why, it's just sort of the energy is. Am I holding the whole thing upside down? Yeah, I am. Okay. And it's, the colors are, you know, bright, fairly bright colors, but somewhat muted. And even though it's beautiful, and yet there's something, like, look at the way that knight, he looks like, is he a real person or is he a statue? There's a lot of, you know, very stern looking faces. I just find the effect it has on me when I'm using it is that it does sort of, like, it tends to call you out on things. Like, it's not in a overly harsh way, but it's blunt. It just sort of lays it out and says, yeah, here's what you need to work on. I know you don't want to see it, but too bad, you know. I mean, even the Sun, which is a fairly positive card in most readings, it's like the deck is beautiful, but there's something that I find it's like deep in your, I don't know, psyche or subconscious. It's like it hits a certain spot where it's like something is a little off, and I think it sort of helps to represent those things we know about ourselves, but we don't necessarily want to know, or we don't necessarily want to acknowledge them. And then, so my most comforting deck, I would say, is the Mythical Dream Tarot. Let me see if I can grab, I don't see where I put the box right now, but yeah, it's a box within a box. It's this deck right here, and this is how the cards look. And I just find, like, I mean, some people probably wouldn't find this comforting at all. It looks like, you know, very old, again, very old, sort of old-fashioned, stern looking drawings, like medieval in a way. But to me, it has a softness to it in the way the art is executed that, I mean, if this were done in a hard-edged sort of style, like a cleaner lines and outlines, it might look a bit more harsh. But I find, I don't know, I just find reading with it, the messages sort of land softly with me. And it's a beautiful deck. So just going through here so you can, yeah, I think you get the idea. Okay, so the next category is everyday use versus decks you use every so often. So a deck I could basically, you know, grab hold of and read with any time would be my Golden Universal Weight Tarot, which is this one here. And I mean, it's basically a lot like the classic Rider-Waite. I mean, I see Taylor Swift there. I don't know about you guys. I just, every time. Anyway, so yeah, I could read with this anything that's close to the Rider-Waite. I mean, I could just, if I had to throw one bag in my deck and one deck in my bag, wow. Mercury retrograde shadow. Anyway, it would probably be this one or my classic Rider-Waite easily. So, okay. And probably the one I reach for probably only every so often, I would have to say, I have them all out here and I'm looking for it on, I have very limited space here. So the Mystical Dream Tarot. So for those who aren't familiar, and I don't see a whole lot of people using this deck very often, it has a fairly limited, there's the backs, it has a fairly limited color palette. Apparently, if I remember correctly, it's supposed to be the color palette that the artist and deck creator dreams in, or something like that. But this is a very different, I mean, I think it integrates meanings from the Rider-Waite. I don't know if it integrates the Thoth or Marseille at all. I'm not sure because I'm not familiar with those deck systems. But it sort of has its own meaning system. So I find it's one of those decks where you have to refer to the book a lot. And because it's dealing with dreams, it has a lot of, you know, other symbols and a lot of other things going on that that you have to sort of look up, which I don't, usually I'm not a fan of that, but I didn't mind it with this deck. I mean, like the Four of Pentacles is an onion, right? Or the Fool is a snake. There's a lot, like, I mean, Seven of Wands there, right? With a, looks like a church or a temple of some kind, place of worship. And some of them, like, you know, you have the Wise Fox. They have different names. The Four of Wands there. And I mean, I remember reading the description for this and thinking it's very different from the traditional, like, the Rider-Waite meaning of the Four of Wands. So, yeah, like, I believe that's the, yeah, there you go. So you get an idea of what it's very different than most tarot decks. But I just felt called to add it to my collection. And I find when I use this one, it honestly, I sometimes have a headache after doing readings with these, but I have gotten some very deep, incredibly deep reads for myself and other people using this deck. And it's almost, it comes across as not really, I wouldn't say poetic fashion, but sort of like metaphors and sometimes messages that have to be further deciphered or things that aren't completely obvious right away. Okay, so the next category is overrated decks versus underrated. Now, I'm going to be honest, the decks that I find overrated, I have never bought them. And so before I get into my underrated deck here, I just would say that for me, probably and these are not bad decks that I have, you know, any issues with or that I hate them or anything. But I find like the Lightseer's Tarot, I think everybody says that one's overrated. And I think it's because I remember Levi said this, and I believe Masculine Intuition readings, that, you know, he had seen it like so much that by the time it actually, you know, came time to get a copy, it's like, you know, you're over it because you've seen it so many times. And for me, another deck that was like that was the Wild Unknown. And I know a lot of people love that deck, so, you know, I'm not hating on it. If a deck, you know, helps you, you know, achieve what you need and what in your life, and, you know, can bring you the clarity you seek and you really connect to it, fine. But I was never really a fan of the art style. I don't know why. It just never really, it could be the same thing where I saw it so much that I just was like, you know, oh, whatever, I don't really feel like I want to work with that. But I know that now that the Tarot in a Tin edition has come out, I may get a copy of that just to work with it and see how I feel. I'm willing to change my mind about things. So with that being said, the underrated deck for me is, I have to say, mostly in terms of the artwork, is the Mermaid Tarot. And of course, you know, being Merciful Mermaid, I suppose I'm biased. Okay, maybe. But yeah, I really thought that this one was, again, sorry for the glare. We are working with very, you know, really not ideal conditions here. So that's why I'm slightly tilting things. I just thought, and if you look in the guidebook, I mean, these are, you know, pretty standard tarot card size. If you look in the guidebook, you get to see these illustrations even larger, at an even larger scale. And so I'm just going to quickly show you some of those, because I think they really wanted to do justice to some of the, and I believe this is completely digital art. They wanted to do justice to the detail here. I mean, clearly this person is incredibly skilled as an illustrator. There's no doubt about that. I mean, look at that gold cup. It's just gorgeous. Okay, and so for the last category, we have decks you use for light work and decks you use for shadow work. So definitely my most light work tarot was the Archangel Power Tarot. I mean, these decks are just so incredibly nice to you, you know, when you're reading with them. So there's the back. And there's colors for different archangels, I believe. So yeah, you have Michael, Gabriel, Major Arcana in purple, Michael, Ariel, and Raphael. And the messages along the bottom, you know, it's a mixture of, it looks like photography and digital. I mean, some people I know find this style maybe kind of tacky, I don't know, but I mean, you know, the messages land pretty softly, right? There's nothing that's really calling you out too much on these. They're just, you know, remember to be kind and love everyone and to be nice to yourself and don't, you know. So anyway, and then my shadow work deck, and I think I could feel this right away would be with my runic tarot here, right? Which is, if I could just grab the box for a second, which was this one here that I got recently. And let's have a look. I think you guys I've shown you this in the last video, but I didn't show you all of the different, I mean, that tower is just wicked. But I mean, I feel like this, especially with the rune readings, the inclusion of these, sorry, the runes on the cards, I mean, like, whoa. Oopsie. You know, like, I mean, wow, you just start looking at these and you're like, you know, this is not justice. I remember in that myth, I think at the end, he made a promise to the wolf, and so he had to, because he's a man of his word, he let him bite his arm off at the end. Okay, so I think you guys get the idea. This is a pretty badass Viking Norse mythology deck. And yeah, I think this definitely would be a great shadow work deck. It definitely has I mean, look at that Queen of Cups, beautiful. Definitely great for shadow work. So before I start rambling, I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to say thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video going forward. Things are a little wobbly there, but hopefully the production will get better in the future as I figure out my lighting and setup. The whole time here I was trying not to have anything fall on me or to have everything that's set up, you know, fall over anything, and we did it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.